Hi everybody, I just watched the first presidential debate of the 2024 election season between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. So let's get through a summary and highlights of the first debate. Starting from the moment the two candidates walked on stage, viewers were reminded that this really is a race between two older men who are in their 80s. That was very clear. I think, in the back of our minds, everybody was thinking that. It did come up later in the questions, the question of their age. From a performance standpoint, this was not Biden's strongest debate. He fumbled his words in the beginning and was not coherent in concisely expressing his thoughts, especially on a question about the economy, in which he mentioned COVID when he meant to say Medicare. This was a moment that Trump took advantage of, saying that he didn't understand that final sentence of Biden's, and he suggested that Biden probably didn't understand it either. Now, Biden's performance did improve toward the middle and the end of the debate, but the problem for him is that most people watch in the beginning and people drop off as the debate goes on. As far as substance, Biden seemed to have more facts, more detail, more content. Trump, with his great delivery, made a lot of inaccurate statements, and he gave some revisionist history that made him look better, but not all of what he said was true. It was only later that CNN brought in their fact checker. Unfortunately for the Biden administration, this happened later during the post-show analysis when nobody was watching. All right, so let's go through the actual content of the debate. I'll give you a quick summary here. The debate started with an overview of the rules, with some very dramatic music, and then they very quickly dove into the first question, which was about the economy. Joe Biden talked of rebuilding the economy after Trump's handling of COVID. Biden said he'd produce more housing, and this was interesting. He said he would cap rents. I don't know how he would do that. I did notice that that was not something that was talked about in any of the post-show analysis, but it flagged my attention as somebody that deals with real estate. Don't know how you can do that in a capitalist economy unless you're dealing with Section 8 rents. That's a separate thing, but they didn't get into it, but it was like a little flag for me. Anyway, he also cited his accomplishments like capping prescription costs. Trump said he had the greatest economy, talked of peace times, and explained that he spent money during COVID that kept America out of a depression. Biden said Trump lost jobs during the COVID era. Trump was asked about wanting to impose a 10% tariff on goods. Trump said he wants to impose it in adversarial countries. Trump was also asked about tax cuts. Trump says that top earners should not pay as much taxes because tax cuts spur the economy. Trump says he passed the COVID accomplishments to the Biden administration. He criticized the Biden administration COVID vaccine mandate and also criticized Biden immigration policies. Biden responded by saying that Trump had the biggest tax cut, says that just raising the taxes on the 1% would be able to allow him to pay for some of the programs that they're putting out. He had a mental lapse and said, we beat Medicare, and then Trump took advantage of that and said, we beat it to death. So in the beginning, there were some of these lapses that made Biden look not great, I gotta say. They talked about Roe v. Wade. Now, this should have been a knockout punch for Biden. Trump takes credit for overturning Roe v. Wade. The federal government still has jurisdiction over abortion pills, says he agrees with the Supreme Court's decision on abortion drugs. This I thought was misleading because they didn't take the case on mifepristone, but it could come up again. It seemed like he didn't really answer the question, and that was a bit of a theme. Trump often did not answer the questions that he was asked. Trump did say that he believes in and accepts an exception on abortion for rape, incest, and the health of the mother. Trump talked about abortion in the 8th month and after birth. This is not a thing. I have no idea what he's talking about. You can't have an abortion after the baby is born. That's not what an abortion is. Biden says that Trump's policies on abortion or the fact that they were able to overturn Roe versus Wade based on Trump's Supreme Court picks was a terrible thing. He says that in some states there's a 6-week limit to when you can have an abortion, and he says that is a terrible limit. He likened the abortion decision to turning racial rights back to the states. Then he talked of rape and he linked abortion to immigrants, which this was not a smart move on his part because it seemed to tee Trump up to turn this conversation into one of the topics that he's strongest on, which is immigration. Trump talked of immigrants raping and killing women, says the founders would have wanted the abortion rights brought back to the states, was very proud of sending the abortion decision back to the states. Now, Biden says he promises to restore Roe versus Wade, says lawmakers should not have jurisdiction over that decision. They debated late-term abortion. Biden reiterated that it passed because of the court that Trump appointed, and this is a very big point. He was trying to make that when you vote for the president, you are voting for the judges on the Supreme Court, because the president is the one who appoints the judges or nominates the judges. Biden talked about migrants crossing the border, says he had a bipartisan agreement on immigration, reminded people then of Trump's family separation policy. Remember, this was the babies in cages era. Biden was fumbling and stuttering at the end of some of his remarks, and Trump took advantage of that, commenting that he had no idea what Biden was saying. They had a back and forth. Biden says that Trump is lying about his stats. Trump talks of his accomplishments, killing 2 top terrorists. Trump says those crossing borders are living in luxury hotels. Compare that to the military, and he says that Biden hates the military. Biden rebuts, says Trump is lying. He talked of his accomplishments regarding providing health care to vets, and he talked about burn pits and how he's helping veterans and supporting them. Biden then reminded how Trump called veterans suckers and losers. Trump said that that was a lie and asked for an apology. Biden says the administration has done more for vets than anyone in history. He scoffed at the notion of apologizing to Trump. Biden was very passionate about the heroism of his son, who was a veteran. And there was a lot of kind of misinformation in this. And they're kind of going at each other. It was kind of uncomfortable to watch, I gotta say. All right, they talked about foreign policy. The topic was the Russian war. Trump decided not to answer that question, but went on to say that vets can't stand Biden. He said Putin would not have invaded if he was president. He talked of Biden botching the exit from Afghanistan. He said Putin invaded Ukraine after seeing how Biden handled Afghanistan. He also said that Iran was broke when he was president, and that prevented Iran from funding Hamas and Hezbollah. Biden called Trump's characterization of what the vets think of him malarkey. That's a word that Biden is known to like to use. Denabash asked if Putin's terms are acceptable to you, meaning to Trump, saying that Putin will only stop the war in Ukraine if he takes over Crimea. Trump says no, and then he says that Biden has given a lot of money to Ukraine, says he will have that war settled before he takes office. Biden says that Putin is a war criminal and wants all of Ukraine, and if he does manage to take all of Ukraine, then what happens to the NATO countries? Biden says that they give Ukraine weapons and not money. Then they talked about the Hamas war and the hostages. Biden says everyone from the UN to the G7 to the Israelis have endorsed the plan that he put forward. He says the only people that want the war are Hamas. He says he denied 2,000-pound bombs to Israel because they don't work as well in populated areas, and he reminded us of his support to Israel when Iran attacked. Biden says Hamas is greatly weakened now. When it was Trump's turn, he went back to Ukraine, says there's an ocean between us. Why does the U.S. have to foot the entire bill? Why can't European countries help pay for support for Ukraine when they are the ones that are most affected by the war there? He didn't really talk a lot about the Israel-Hamas war. I just have it marked in my notes here because he just said a little bit. He said Israel does want to go in and finish the job, and you should let them go in. Biden says he got 50 other nations to support Ukraine. Trump was asked, would you support an independent Palestinian state? Trump didn't really answer that question. He answered by talking about NATO and paying everyone's bills. So that was a disappointment that they didn't go into more detail or demand more answers from the candidates on that war. They talked about January 6th. Trump says on January 6th, they had a great border. Low regulations were respected around the world. Trump was asked about violating his oath, and Trump says that he didn't do that. Again, they didn't bring the fact checkers in until after the debate was over. Trump says he offered the National Guard, and Nancy Pelosi refused. Biden said he watched again, not accurate. Biden said he watched Trump sit for hours while his VP asked for help. Biden says Trump went to every court in the nation to overturn the election and lost. Then Biden called Trump a whiner. Trump talked of the riots and fires during the protests. Biden points out Trump is a convicted felon. He says Trump is trying to revise what happened. The idea that those who would storm the Capitol are patriots is ridiculous. He says Trump is trying to revise what happened. Biden says the idea that those who storm the Capitol are patriots is ridiculous. Trump was asked about going after his political opponents, and he changed the topic. He talked about Hunter Biden and says Biden could be a convicted felon with his presidential mistakes. Trump says he did nothing wrong. Then Biden insisted on rebutting that, and he was allowed to. Biden says the idea that they are comparable is wrong. He brought up Trump's other cases. This is when he hit him hard, but it was like, I don't know. I mean, not really super presidential. It just reminded us of the crazy wackiness that we are seeing with the presidential election in 2024. Biden said he has these other cases. He's accused of, he brought up the case. He talked about Trump having sex with a porn star, was accused of sexual assault. He says Trump has the morals of an alley cat. Trump says that Biden has no idea of his cases, and then Trump boasted about raising money on the backs of those cases. Biden says Trump has a lot more cases to face, and he has a real problem. Biden says that he decided to run for president after Charlottesville. Biden reminded people of Trump's own anti-Semitic comments. Trump says the Charlottesville story was debunked. Biden says that we saw what happened with our own eyes at Charlottesville and on January 6th. Biden then says, and I think this is an important quote, that 40 of Trump's 44 top cabinet officers refused to endorse him. His vice president has not endorsed him either. And then he asked why. Then they talked about black voters. Biden listed his accomplishments. Trump harped on inflation, says that the country was perfect, and Biden destroyed it with the, quote, Green New Scam. He talked of the border, says people are coming in, are taking black and Hispanic jobs. Sounded a little borderline racist to me. Biden says that there was no inflation because the economy was decimated because of the way that Trump handled COVID. All right, they talked about the climate crisis. Trump did not answer questions and went back to talk about the police and his accomplishments for Black Americans. Now, the way this debate worked was that they asked the questions and then the candidates can use that time to answer whatever they want, I guess. And so many times Trump did not answer the question that he was asked. Trump says he wants clean water and clean air, says he had the best environmental numbers. Biden says that they passed the most extensive climate change policies, and he went back to talk about HBCUs, then called out Trump's lie and says that Trump pulled out of the Paris Peace Accord. Trump says that the Paris Peace Accord was a disaster because only America was paying for it. Biden talks about the Paris Peace Accord's points. He says he points out the progress and he points out his climate accomplishments. They talk about prescription drugs, climate, HBCUs, and there's like a mishmash of certain answers. Then they talk about keeping Social Security solvent. Biden says that the top 1% of earners need to pay their fair share. This has to do with Social Security because he says that if they raise taxes on the top 1%, then they'll be able to pay for all the programs that they want to fund. Biden warns that Trump wants to get rid of Social Security. Biden says the American public has greater healthcare coverage than ever before. Trump says that Biden is lying and he accuses him of spreading misinformation and disinformation. Trump says Biden is destroying Social Security because people coming over the border are getting care while vets are out on the street. And obviously, Biden refutes the claim that he does not care about veterans. On the issue of childcare, Trump does not answer. He talks about Biden being the worst president. He's clearly agitated at this point. Biden says that the U.S. is the most admired country in the world, says that presidential historians ranked Trump as being the worst president in American history, and this clearly seemed to get under Trump's skin. In my opinion, it seemed like he was really upset about this fact being brought to light. Biden points out that Trump did nothing for childcare. Then Trump got another chance to answer the childcare question. He was clearly agitated at being called the worst president, and he talked about cutting taxes instead. Biden talked about tariffs and taxes, says the middle class have been devastated by Trump, and says Trump has made no progress with China. A lot of bouncing around on different topics that they are not asked about. They were asked about the opioid crisis. Trump then took the opportunity to link the border crisis, immigration, and drug problems. Biden actually said that fentanyl use is down. The moderators pointed out that if Biden is elected, he'd be 86 at the end of his second term. And Biden rebutted that by saying that he spent half of his career being criticized for being the youngest lawmaker, and now he's being criticized for being the oldest. Basically, he was leaning into his political experience, and he gave examples of how he was bringing back jobs. He said that this idea that Trump brought up that America is a failing country, he says, what president talks like that? Says the USA is the very envy of the world and that everybody would want to trade places with us. Trump boasted of taking 2 cognitive tests, won 2 club championships, says he's in good shape and he feels very well. Then they argued about golf. Biden says, you can see he's 6'5", 224 pounds. He was clearly making fun of Trump and Trump's physical stats that he claims to have. Trump said that Biden would not take him up on a round of golf, and Biden said that he's very happy to play golf with Trump if Trump can carry his own bag. And then they exchanged some childish quips with each other. They called each other children, said you're a child. Anyway, it was very unpresidential, very unbecoming. Donald Trump was asked, will you accept the election and say political violence is unacceptable? Trump says that he did that. Then he went on to blame Nancy Pelosi, says that Biden indicted him. Biden is not part of the indictments. Trump says that the USA is a, quote, seriously failing nation, and we're going to make America great again. He says that we're very close to World War III right now. Not really a message that Americans want to hear, I think. Biden says that in Article 5, an attack on one is an attack on all, says America is a great nation, and says we're needed around the world to step up. And then they went back to the question on Putin and how the Ukraine war wouldn't have started if he was president, says that Ukraine is not winning. So it was very clear, and Biden actually pointed it out, that Trump is taking a very negative view and Biden is taking a very positive view about what America is and, where America's standing is in the world right now. Trump was asked for a third time, will you accept the results of this election, yes or no? And Trump says, quote, if it's fair, absolutely. So whatever that means. He goes on about how Biden is destroying the country, says his numbers are up. Biden says, we'll see how high your numbers are after this election is over. You won't accept it because you're a whiner. Meaning you won't accept the results of the election because you're a whiner. Then they had closing arguments. Biden said that we must have a fair tax system, says Trump has increased taxes. Biden says he negotiated prescription drug prices and managed to reduce the deficit. Then Trump was given the final word here in his closing arguments. He called Biden a complainer, said Iran was broke and had no money for terrorism, says for 3 years we've been living in hell. He talks of the Palestinians protesting everywhere because they don't respect Joe Biden. So which one is up to the task to be president? That's going to be for us to decide. But really, this is just the first debate. Now, the debate was hosted on CNN, and so right afterwards, they had some commentators. They were all talking about how badly Biden did at the beginning of the debate, and they were suggesting that he should be replaced. I don't think that that's feasibly actually going to happen. I do believe that it's going to be a Biden versus Trump rematch in the election. And I think that what this debate did was remind people of what they thought of the other candidate. So you see that Trump is up for re-election, but it's been 4 years since we saw him in the public eye. He's not on Twitter. He's not out and about. I mean, he's out at his rallies and stuff, but he's not on the news every single night. And so this was a reminder of what a Trump presidency would look like. For Biden, it was also a reminder that he's getting older, but also knows policy. And they did talk about their policies, and I thought that was very useful. Some of the main issues, maybe they didn't drive their points home as much as I would like to have seen, but I found it to be useful to be reminded where the candidates stand. What do you think? Did you watch the debate, or are you one of those people that likes to watch the recap later? Did you watch the commentary? What do you think about what others thought about the debate? And what did you think about it? Do you think that either one of these candidates won the debate, or does that even matter? Does it matter just what is their stance on the issues? I'd love to hear your opinions. Please leave them below in the comments, and I'll see you later. Bye.